The way I've been dealing with being a musician in the COVID era is by not doing music. So I was supposed to be on tour during this time. I had shows scheduled with a few different groups, including my own band, Spirit Fingers, and obviously everything was canceled. And so when I realized that life was going to be very different and I had this whole blank slate of time, I thought to myself, what am I going to do with this time? It was sort of a gift. It was like, I'm trying not to say like. It was a blank slate, a period of time where I could pivot. And so I decided I would do two things. One, I would release all the music that I had recorded in the past 2 years, because I had spent the past 2 years just on creative, not on distribution. And I had tons of recordings, including like 52 singles that I hadn't released. So I've been putting those out. I formed a label structure, signed an imprint onto Rope-A-Dope Records, hired a label manager, and started releasing that music. I also signed 2 more artists because I had this infrastructure and knew some artists that I wanted to help get their music out. So essentially I formed a record label. That's one of the ways. The second way is I started a TV show called Mornings with Greg. I said to myself that I need to learn live streaming, because I knew live streaming was going to be a big part of the future once I realized that COVID was happening and everybody was quarantining. By the way, I also realized that it was going to be a much longer time period than they were initially saying. So I started Mornings with Greg and pledged to do 1 hour of live streaming every single morning at 8 a.m. from 8 to 9 a.m. and did it for 100 days straight. We got syndication on Jazz Times and a bunch of other networks via Facebook cross-posting, and it ended up being a really interesting and engaging experience, and I was able to interview some of my friends who I hadn't spoken with in quite some time. The third thing that I did was I started this app because I realized that musicians would need a new way of making income. The landscape for selling records had been annihilated from streaming music, and now the landscape for making money off of touring, which was everybody's, pretty much most musicians' primary income source, that was gone. So I decided that I needed to build this idea that I had been putting together for actually years, to allow people to ask questions of people they follow and crowdfund the answers, because there's a latent market there waiting to be tapped into. And for all artists, I think every single artist in the world can use this platform. So I started building this platform and raised a little bit of seed capital, got a great user interface designer, got a great developer, and ended up hiring some people overseas to help with development as well, and onboarded a few interns, and we were off to the races. We've been developing now since the beginning of COVID, and we have this app that you're using. So that's how I used my time during the COVID era.